is the one that you should focus on when you close your eyes at night. And it's because of his grace you're waking up the next morning. It is because of who he is that you're able to make ends meet. And he is the one that gives you peace in the midst of a storm. And he is the one that even when the storm wants to rage, he says, peace, be still. It is through him that all these things happen. And it's through him that we gather just to give thanks for everything that he's done. And so I just want to take a few minutes this morning and talk to you about your first love. I want to talk to you about your first love and be able to get some focus, if you will. And this message goes to those that are saved and not saved. This message goes to those that go to church regularly and those that don't yet go to church regularly. And so this message goes to all. And I do concur, agree with Pastor Kim that talked about it is so important for us to assemble together regularly. I know many folks who can quote the Bible, went to Bible training and all this other stuff, but they don't go to church regularly. And they don't feel the need to be able to come together corporately. But you can't tell me anywhere in the Bible where it says that it's wrong to come together. Because on the opposite ends, it says that you should be able to come together, not forsake the assembling of yourselves. How can you be part of a family if you don't want to be a part of a family? And so it's important that we do this. This is where you hear the word. This is where the strength comes from. And so I want to talk to you briefly about your first love. And, you know, and I'm challenged with this in the sense that, and I've said to you many times over the past few weeks, and I've told you even before, that, you know, I don't want to say amazed, but I'm aware of so many people who are lonely. There are so many, and I can't even begin to explain to you in the context of the size of folks that are lonely, some admitting it, many lurking in the shadows of loneliness, and they're just aching for somebody to care. They're aching for somebody to love them. And even to the point that many who reach out to us for ministry, because for us, ministry doesn't stop once we get off the pulpit or the platform. It goes on throughout the course of the week. And those that are reaching out, it is just, again, I mentioned this, I believe, 1 or 2 weeks ago, that it's amazing, not in a good way, but so many people are looking for love somewhere. And there are so many broken hearts, and those that are just longing for someone to realize that I'm here, that I care, and I want somebody to care for me too. And so this is the situation, and I thought about this a lot, and I started wondering, it's like, well, maybe the issue is people don't know what love means. And because of that, people go in and out of love. That's how some people get married 6, 7, 8, 9 times, because of their definition of what love is. And so when you begin to think about it that way, that's part of the problem. And the expectation of a person, I believe, in the general public, in the general world, is that what they see or what they hear on media is the definition of what love is. The problem with that is because depending on what station you turn to, the definition changes. Depending on the month, the year, the decade, the definition changes. And so there isn't a common definition in the popular world. And that's part of the problem. And so people think that they should be loved like the movie they saw. Or they should be loved like this situation they saw. The problem is, what they see on TV or movies isn't real. People don't always have their hair perfect and their makeup on. People don't always have money falling out of their bank accounts and their latest sports cars. People don't always look like James Bond or the Bond girls. People don't always look that way or experience traveling all over the world because they decided to. That's not how life works. And so I remember there was a comedy a number of years ago, and I think it was called Are We There Yet? I think it was one of those. And one of the main characters sitting there at a table during dinner, and she was by herself, and someone wanted to come talk to her, and she said, "Stop, I'm married, I got 3 kids, I don't look like this in the morning. So don't think and don't even try, just keep on moving." And so she was being truthful in the sense that to be looking like they look in the movies, it takes some work. Say work.
Work.
But because someone looks like that in the movies doesn't mean that that's love, because that's superficial.
Right.
And so people try to gauge themselves to that. And so there's a problem there, and that results in loneliness in the sense that they can't meet that standard, or the person doesn't love them like their latest movie, then they feel like there's something wrong. Or even the song that came out years ago, and there's more to it, but the question in the song was, in the lyrics was, what's love got to do with it?
Yeah.
It's just a secondhand emotion. If that's your definition of love, then your life will go like this from an emotional perspective. And so I ponder that whole thing about, well, this love part and people's definition. And so because things change from time to time, there's never a basis for the truth. Me being me, I did a little bit of research on music, lyrics. And I would invite you guys to do it on your own. It's kind of eye-opening. And the research that I was starting to do, because I was trying to discipline myself not to get lost in the research and keep on going down, the time fly by, like other people that I know. And so in it, I was doing that research, and I was curious, well, what are the topics that are popular in music over the decades? And of course, love songs are pretty high up. And then I began to look, and it showed that, well, there's been changes, although they're popular, but changes in love songs. The lyrics have gotten more explicit and vulgar in the way that they do things. And they compared it from the 50s and up until the 2000s. And so then it got into the point of, well, what are the other things that are important and all? Well, now people are depicting love purely from a physical standpoint. Do you have the right curves? Do you have the right fill in the blanks? And that's what the lyrics are about. And even if you look at some, and I'm not going to name artists, about this whole thing, it's really more about sexual, physical fulfillment, which they equate that to love. And if they don't get that at that time, then that's not love. There's a problem with that. And so it's all about the carnal aspect of it, and that's where people are focusing. And then to make it even more explicit, here's the fun exercise for you to do sometime. And that is pull out your phone, not now, pull out your phone, get on the computer, and then just look at popular lyrics of songs that are love songs. There's no depth to them. And you read them and you're like, that's a love song, why? Boy, that makes me sad. Or it's like, I don't even understand this. What's going on? But if you begin to just search, don't just stick, and if you do this, if you're bold enough to do this, don't just search in that genre that you like. Don't just stay there, just go across the board, look at lyrics. And you'll be amazed about what you find. Maybe not in a good way, but you'll be amazed at what you find. And so this is what society bases everything on. Remember, I'm talking about your first love. And so therein lies part of the problem. If things don't stay a certain way, then people feel devastated. The amount of messages that we get about devastation because something changed, or the way a person interacts with them, and now they're sad, they're lost, they're lonely. What's life? What's important to life? That person isn't acting the same way or there. And they're basing it off of that, and they're desperate. You see, many people will go to music because that has an impact on folks, but the words and the things that are being said aren't helping. They aren't uplifting. Could it be that the general population has never really experienced love? Because they don't know what it means. And so when you look at this exercise that I told you to do, and I'm going to leave it alone, but when you do that, look at the decades in which you're looking at the type of music, and think about the major things that were going on during those times. Because the music reflects the soul of a people. And then you begin to see and understand that, that's part of the problem. But I realize for all of humanity, people have been struggling and looking at this love and our position with it. And at some point, somebody lifts up their head and realizes that God must love us. And when you begin to look at that and you realize that it's so much better than what we're hearing and seeing in the regular population, regardless of what century it is, then you look and you begin to try to fathom how and why God would love us. Because each one of us knows the depths of the failures we've had in our life or the things we said we would do and didn't do. For many, it's just getting out of bed on a Sunday morning and just coming to church. For others, it's more of just trying to read the Bible one time a week. For others, there are little things that you promised somebody else you would do, and the moment you left their presence, you forgot or just decided you weren't doing it. You just said it. We've all had those moments. Other changes in our life we've always thought about doing and didn't do. Or we made promises to God. If you get me out of this situation, then I will do this. He gets you out of the situation and you said, did I say something? Thank you for getting me out. But no. And we don't change or do what we say. But even the psalmist was really struggling with this and thought about it. And he realized that the depth of God's love, that he would love us because we realize that in ourselves we're not lovable. In ourselves we don't deserve the love. But he says in Psalms 36 and 7, excuse me, how precious is your loving kindness, O God. Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of your wings. How precious is your loving kindness, your love. Meaning that, wow, it is so precious that you would love us unworthy. And even earlier in another psalm it says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? And the son of man that thou visiteth him. He's struggling with this concept that we too look at as like, well, why would you do that? Even all of heaven would look and say, what is man? That you focused on him or mankind so much that you gave yourself for mankind. Look at how they're messing up on a regular basis. Look how Adam and all the others just turned their back to what was given to them and the one who gave it. But yet the love is so deep. And it's amazing when you take time to begin to think about it. And so this is something that we must understand, that he loves us so much, even though he knows all about us and things that we don't even yet realize about ourselves. But his love is that deep. His love is so encompassing that his love can't be separated. And so that's what we have to understand. And in times when we deserve judgment, yet his love prevails. I always like to read about the Apostle John and talk about him because he's always, and I'll tell you this over and over again, but he was pursuing the love of the Lord. He knew that that was the most important one. And although I cannot point to this biblically, nor could I say this was the intent, but that love, he ended up being the longest living one out of all of them. He lived to be in the 90s as far as tradition says. He lived beyond them all. And he got to see the Lord in a way that the others didn't quite grasp at that time. He was blessed because he desired the presence of the Lord more than anyone or anything else. And he's the one traditionally talking about when he could hardly walk and they were carrying him, he would still talk about love. Because he knew, most importantly, that that was the foundation of everything, and love emanated from his Savior, Jesus Christ. But I remember, and I look at this, and as we talk about the first love, it is so important for us to realize that our first love needs to be the Lord. We need to make sure that everything is focused on him first, and everything else is underneath. We have to realize that it's all about Jesus. And I'm not talking about because you have a Jesus hat that says Jesus all the way around it, no matter which side they look at, it says Jesus. I'm not talking about you might have a vehicle that has neon lights that say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I'm not talking about having any other paraphernalia, which are big t-shirts that's like Jesus is the Lord and Savior. And on the back it says Jesus, on your sleeves it says Jesus. I'm not talking about going to that kind of level. But what I am saying is in the things that you focus on, think about, in all that you do and you remember, it is about him. Even if you never wear t-shirts and paraphernalia of any type. But yet it's from the inside that you know who he is, and that you erupt in praise for him because you know what he's done. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 17 through 19, this is where love is discussed, and this is where John is talking about love, one of many places. But this is something that he's trying to tell us and make sure that we understand. That not only do we have to make sure we love Jesus, but that love has to be in us. And it says in verse 17, love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Now, I'm talking about love versus judgment here in this whole topic of your first love. He says, look, love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so are we in this world. Therefore, I'll put the therefore. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. I was sharing recently with someone, stay there for a minute please. I was sharing with someone recently, within the past few weeks, about, look, they were trying to make a decision, but they were afraid. I said, look, you're trying to get straight with the Lord. Fear can't rule over you, because if you let fear go, you will never do anything. Because when fear reigns, then you don't have faith actively working. So you need to be able to lose your faith and believe God and take a step. Well, how do I do it? Take a step and trust that the Lord will give you the next step and begin to go through that. And so you can't be fearful of what might happen. Just know that he is the one that would take you through it, and that's faith. And so here again, verse 18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. But verse 19 is key. But we love him, right? We love him because he first loved us. Why is that verse so important? It's important for us to realize that he loved us first when we shouldn't have been loved by anybody. When we think about it, we realize that he loved us, so that means we're accepted and he's cleaning us up. And if he's showing that love, then his love becomes a part of who we are. Because in the earlier verse it says, as he is, so are we. If we agree with that, that means that if he has love and he is love, then in us we must have love. Okay? Now, because he's done all of this, and because of the joy set before him, he endured the cross and did everything else for us, for love, then we must realize that our love has to go back to him. He first loved us. So our attention has to be to him, because we have life because of him. And we should be grateful because of him. Therefore, your first love, my first love, needs to be Jesus. No other one. No other thing. No other event. That doesn't mean you can't do other things. But what I'm saying, your first and foremost has to be him. You have to know that you know that you know from the depths of your soul that you love him. And so that means that when things occur and no one else is physically around, you know Jesus is there. And you're okay with that. When no one else can encourage you, you know Jesus is there. And you know you have encouragement because you know he will never let you fall out of his hands. He will never let you go into despair. He will keep you in perfect peace, right? And so when you think about that, your first love really has to be him. So the only way that you love him, you look at, well, if you never knew what love was, look at how he showed love to you. Look at how you thought you were about to go off a cliff, but he didn't allow it. Look at how you didn't know how you're going to make ends meet month to month, but he provided. Look at when you didn't think about where food was coming from, but he provided. Look at how you weren't sure where the next opportunity was coming from, but he gave it. And so then you're showing love. He's giving. He's giving. Oh, so that means that I have to be like him. I'm not him, but I can be like him because his love is now in us. And I want you to know that love is the foundation of everything that's in the Bible. Remember, the number one commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your... Right? And then the second one is like that, which is love your neighbor as yourself. But this whole thing about love is all-encompassing. He gives love to us. We're supposed to give love to everyone else that's around. And as I said to you the other day, sometimes it's hard to love people. Or you may say that I'm not an emotional, loving person. It isn't about a secondhand emotion. That's not what love is about. Love is much deeper than that. It is the foundation of everything. The way that you're able to love someone when you really don't want to love them, you think about the love you have for him. And then he gives you the love to be able to share with someone else. When you really are looking and you're like, I don't want to, but you think about how much you want to please him and how much of a love relationship you have with him so you can pour it out to the next person.